What, baby? Okay. So you guys see a head here. Or me petting. It's Belle here. It's Belle here. But yeah, so hey guys, Soraya here. Welcome back to my channel. Long time no see. I am coming off of a cold, so if I sound a little nasally, that is why. But I wanted to get this video out for you guys. I know it's a little bit late, but what can we do? So I wanted to give you guys my 22-ish books of 2022. Ooh, wow, okay. My 22 favorite books of 2022. Now I say 22-ish because I actually have 23 on this list, but I don't know if I'll include the 23rd. If I do, I'll let you know. But yeah, so this is going to take a while, so let's just go ahead and get started. So the first book I have on this list is The Devil by Ashley Jade, and really it includes like the duet, so The Devil and The Devil Advocate, and this duet series, whatever you want to call it, follows Eden, and her mother has just died. She was I think she was like the mayor of this town, and Eden has been left with her stepfather, Cain, and she is in love with him. And this is her coming to terms with that romance. There's a lot of twists and turns in this story. I really, really like it a lot. It also includes like backstory on Cain and his life and how he came to be where he is now, and why some things are good, some things are bad, some things just seem to be not quite right about him, period. And Eden kind of figuring out that not everything is what it seems. And like I said, I really, really loved this duet. I read it in like quick succession. They're very short anyway, but fantastic if you ever want like a love triangle, age gap, mystery type thing with a lot of like drama and psychological stuff. This is it for you. So next I have an emotional read, and this one I picked up a long time ago. I think I have it in a haul video like from like 2 years ago on here, where I picked it up because I wanted a book that would make me cry, and I finally got to it in 2022, and that is Unbreak My Heart by Nicole Jacqueline. So this one follows Kate, and Kate and her friend Rachel have been best friends since they were kids. They've been closer than close, and Rachel ends up marrying Shane, and Shane is in the military. He knows Kate because her aunt was his foster parent, and that's how he got introduced to Rachel. And whenever Shane was away, Kate would always end up like taking the parental role between his and Rachel's kids. So she's always been there, but he didn't know that. And then tragedy strikes, Rachel dies, and she's now left 4 kids in the care of Kate and Shane. And Shane is kind of lost. He doesn't really know what to do without Rachel. He doesn't know how to fill the void, and then he doesn't really understand Kate, because even though she's grieving for Rachel, she also just kind of doesn't falter in the routine of the kids' lives. Like, she knows what they're supposed to be doing, where they're supposed to be going, what their whole life, pretty much their life is scheduled out to be. Can you hear her? She is like moving around trying to find her spot, and it is like a thing. Anyway. And then him and Kate are also kind of coming to terms with the fact that maybe they have feelings for each other that they've been putting off for years and years, and then they have to deal with that kind of guilt too. So this one was definitely an emotional read. It was really sad. It pulled at your heartstrings. It made you kind of realize that maybe your first love is your true love, and it was a good one. It was a good one, if I do say so myself, since I picked it out. Okay, so the next one I picked up for a video that I actually have filmed and mostly edited. I just haven't put it up yet, but that is Through My Window by Ariana Godoy, and this one follows Raquel, and it is a like new adult coming of age kind of story where Raquel has grown up next to this rich family, and they have 3 sons. They have Aries, Apollo, and Artemis. And Raquel has always been obsessed with Aries. She's always wanted him, and something happens where she finds out that he has been hacking into her Wi-Fi, and so that instigates their first meeting. And from that point on, she is kind of obsessed with being with Aries. And throughout the story, you get their life struggles as they grow into adulthood and figuring out who they want to be, dealing with family expectations. And it's really interesting. I like the conversations that Aries and Raquel have with each other and their dynamic, especially with their friends and that whole friend group. I enjoy this book mainly for the communication, because you don't get a lot of new adult books where there isn't miscommunication necessarily. It's not, oh, well, I think this one cheated on me and that's why I broke up with him. That's not in this. It is a lot of tough questions that they're trying to answer and a lot of roads they're trying to navigate on how to follow their dreams, how to be together and follow their dreams, how to live their lives, how to not disappoint their parents and their families and deal with those expectations. And I just really enjoyed this a lot. It is like a little bit of a chunky book, but it was worth it, and I think it needed to be that long. By the way, I'm not telling you any trigger warnings. I probably should. So, trigger warning for sexual assault and domestic violence, and I'm trying to think of what else, like verbal abuse. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's it. And then Unbreak My Heart doesn't have any. And then for Through My Window, trigger warnings for attempted suicide. Whew. Okay. So the next one I have on this list is Eyes on Me by Sarah Kate. And this one is on my list and not Give Me More, because I do own them both, as well as Praise and whatever. But this one's on my list because I liked the discussion on depression. Like, even though I felt like it could have been more, I enjoyed what was there. So I should probably tell you what this is about. So it follows Mia and Garrett is one of the owners in the Salacious Players Club, which is a club that is open to people with different sexual tastes. And Mia is his stepsister. So he kind of goes home for the summer to spend time with his family, and he ends up finding out that Mia is a cam girl and Garrett likes voyeurism, which is kind of how he stumbles upon Mia. And from that point on, he like takes it as his idea that it's on. So he pursues her both online, where she doesn't know it's him, and actually getting to know her in real life, because as they've grown up and become adults, they've kind of grown apart a bit. So is them kind of figuring out their dynamic and their relationship with each other. And I really enjoyed this. Like I said, it does deal a lot with depression and handling that depression. So trigger warnings for that if you have any problems with that, but I don't know. I know a lot of people feel like this one doesn't delve deep enough, but I also think as someone who deals with depression personally, that I think if it had delved any deeper, it could have been supremely damaging and triggering for a lot of people. Because even though you want more, to delve deep into somebody's mind who is in a depressive state, I think would be triggering for you personally. And I know for myself, I would have felt that way. So just keep that in mind. So now I'm going to go through some books that I don't own. I don't even think I said that this book or this list is kind of leading up to, so it's kind of like my favorite books, but not the best books, leading up to my favorite book. So there you go. That's why my list is kind of like all over the place. But anyway, so the next book on my list, she is literally pushing me. The next book on my list is Devil of Dublin by B.B. Easton. So this one follows Darby and Kellen, and Darby is the daughter of a single mother, and her mother is actually from Ireland, and when her grandmother dies, she goes back to Ireland with her mother, and she kind of ends up stumbling upon this little boy in the forest. And at first, because she's a little girl and her grandpa has told her all of these stories about the fairies in the woods, she assumes he's a fairy. But she very quickly realizes that that might not be the case. And then the little boy that she meets is Kellen. And Kellen has kind of got a bad reputation in this town. He has been taken in by the parishioner of this town. I can't remember if he's a like a priest or something, but he's been taken in by him, and he's very abusive to Kellen, and Kellen's mom just kind of disappeared when he was a kid. And so Kellen doesn't talk at all. He can, but he doesn't. And so every year or so, when Darby comes back to Ireland, she spends all of her time with Kellen. And throughout the years, they develop a relationship with each other. And then all of a sudden, she doesn't come back. And then you flash to their adulthood, where she comes back after the death of her grandfather, and she kind of reunites with Kellen, but he's a very different person than what she knew when they were kids. And her life is a lot different as well. I will say trigger warnings for sexual assault, physical assault, domestic violence. This book is heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because you're watching two very damaged people try to find each other and learn how to cope with life, even with all their cracks and flaws. And it's sad to see it, but it's also heartwarming to see that they have that support in each other, even though they've come from two very different lives in a way. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend. So after that, on my list, I have Sainthood, which is I think it's the very last book I read in 2022, and the Sainthood series, so I cheated a little bit. The first book, I think, is called Resurrection, and it follows Harlow, and in the beginning of the story, Harlow's father dies in an accident, and she is basically devastated. He was her best friend, and in the beginning, to cope with that, she goes to her boyfriend, but she finds him cheating on her with someone else, so she kind of decides she wants to get back at him, and she sleeps with these 4 guys. She sleeps with Saint, Galen, Theo, and Kaz, and they are part of the Sainthood Syndicate, which is like a mafia group. And I think it's a year or like 6 months pass, and she ends up like switching schools because she gets kicked out of her school, and she is now in school with the Sainthood. And the story kind of takes off from there, where it's a lot of twists and turns in this story, a lot of things that you don't see coming, but then a lot of things you do see coming, and it is definitely wild and bonkers. And the plot does take some very like artistic license, but I do think that it's entertaining to the point where I did want to keep reading it, and I was like just eating it up like popcorn. And it definitely wasn't something that I wanted to put down at any point. I was at the point where I was like, I couldn't wait to get back to it, to just see all the drama and the messiness of the characters, because there's always something. I enjoyed Harlow and her four guys and like watching their relationship develop. I enjoyed the dynamic of their relationship, because it's not like, it's more poly than it is just female and four guys, more reverse harem. It is a little bit poly in there. It was definitely engrossing. I finished the whole, like, I think it was trilogy series. It was either 4 or 3 books, but I finished them all. But they were fantastic. So next on this list, I have Brutal Vows by J.T. Geshinger, and this one is book 4 or 5 in the Gods and Monsters series by her, and it follows Spider, who we got to know a lot in the previous book, and Raina. And basically Spider, he's had his heart broken and he agrees to an arranged marriage, and he is Declan from the second book in the series. He's Declan's second in command. So when he agrees to this arranged marriage, he believes he's going to marry this young Italian girl, and he's all for that. He doesn't really care anymore. He knows he might not necessarily fall in love with his wife, but he's just willing to deal with that. And then he meets Raina, who is his soon-to-be wife's aunt, and she is the exact opposite of the girl he's supposed to be marrying. She is very headstrong. She is outspoken. She is not afraid of doing anything that a man can do. And a lot of that stems from the fact that she had an abusive marriage, and when her husband died, she kind of made a vow to herself that she would never cower before a man again. And so she kind of goes toe to toe with Spider, and their back and forth is what is the most entertaining about the book. And a lot of the things that I love about J.T. Geshinger's male main characters is that not only are they not afraid to like banter with the females, but they also have a good sense of worship for their females. I feel like I love all the books in this series, and they're always quick, easy reads for me, and they're never disappointing. And then I have Toxic by Maggie Cole. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, then you know I think it was 2021, I read my first book by Maggie Cole, my first and my only book by Maggie Cole, and I did not love it. I didn't hate it. It wasn't a bad book, and I knew that going in, so I couldn't say, oh, this book was so badly written. It wasn't. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I had heard a lot of really good things about Toxic, so I thought I'd read it. So it follows Dante and Bridget, and basically when they were young, Bridget was obsessed with Dante. She was in love with him, and he kind of strung her along and yo-yoed back and forth with whether he wanted to be with her or he didn't, until she got fed up with it and she went off to college and she fell in love with someone else and she married that person and they had kids. And through all that time, Dante had always been holding a torch for her and hoping one day she would come back. Well, then flash forward, I think it's like 18 years, her husband ends up dying and she moves back home to, I think they're in Chicago, but she moves back home, and Dante, who has still been waiting for her all this time, looks at this as like his opportunity. I mean, through the years, even though she married someone else, he did still love her, and he kind of decided, well, if I couldn't be with her, then I would support her and be her friend. So they've been friends, but it hasn't been anything romantic. And so now that her husband has passed away and she's trying to cope with this new dynamic in her life, he decides he wants to be there for her and her kids, and that's where their romance starts. Throughout the story, you learn what happened to her husband, why she's back, what really went on, and it's just a lot going on. She's keeping a lot of secrets. And I do appreciate with Maggie Cole that a lot of her romances, I think actually all of her romances, are with mature characters. Like, they're not young 20 something or like just out of their teens people, that they are like in their 30s, in their 40s, like they have kids, they have lives, they have actual things that they have to do. And I do really appreciate that about Maggie Cole and all her main characters, and it's definitely something that I like, especially as I get older, and I'll definitely want to try more Maggie Cole following Toxic. So next on my list I have Mute by M.L. Nystrom, and this one follows Katrina and Mute. Now Mute, obviously, as you can tell, he's mute because he doesn't talk, and Kat is a down on her luck bartender. So basically what happens is she loses her job, and one of her like clients or patrons says, hey, I have a job for you if you want to come and do this. And she ends up working at a biker bar, and that's how she ends up meeting Mute. Now from then on, even though she knows, like, hey, I'm attracted to him, he kind of is standoffish to her, and she doesn't really understand why. Like, he's very hot and cold. Sometimes he'll want to be there for her, sometimes he doesn't, but he doesn't really want her with anyone else. She doesn't understand what's going on, and I appreciate the fact that they have their own kind of language with each other, even though he doesn't talk really. Like, he'll just look at her and she'll think in her mind, because you get this from her perspective, and you know that she knows exactly what he's saying, because in her mind he's saying it. So even though he's not actually saying any words, she understands what he's saying just from his look, and it's hilarious. So in that dynamic, I love their banter back and forth with each other, because it's not really banter when the people around them are just kind of looking at them and trying to understand what the heck they're doing and like what they're saying, because he'll just stand there and be looking at her, and then she'll say something back to him, and then he'll give her another look, and then she'll say something back, and it's just like, okay, so how do you know what he's trying to say when he didn't say anything? It's hilarious. I loved it. It was definitely one of my favorite books, and I made it, or I tried to make it a point to pick up more MC books this year, because I felt like I haven't been reading a lot of them outside of Gianna Darling. So I've been trying to pick up more, and this one was definitely perfection. So after that, I have on this list Ruining Dahlia. And Ruining Dahlia is a book that was unexpected to me. It's a chunky book, by the way. And I don't even know if I said it's by C.R. Jane, and I didn't plan on liking it as much as I did. I just thought, oh, it's just a mafia reverse harem book. I'll just pick it up. It'll be fine. I ended up loving this book, and it made me cry. So it follows Dahlia, who has just turned 18, and her father tells her, hey, you're moving to New York to marry your husband, basically. And in this world, 18 years previously, the mafia bosses all got together and they decided to create a truce. And in order to promote, like, goodwill between each other, they decided that all of the firstborn sons would marry the firstborn daughters of each mafia boss. So it was just random. Nobody got to pick who was with who, so it would make it fair. So basically, Dahlia is supposed to marry Lucien, who is the Italian mafia boss in New York. So she's moving from London, and as she gets on, you can't see her, but she is literally crawling right behind me in my sweater. Okay. We're gonna try and function with her like in my sweater, but we'll see how it goes. But anyway, so she moves from London to New York, and as she's on the plane, she's like panicking about her new life and how she's gonna fit in and what is gonna happen. And she ends up meeting this stranger on the plane who kind of talks her down from her panic attack and helps her out, and she ends up sleeping with this stranger on the plane. And some things happen, and she ends up with this new group of guys, and she doesn't know how she fits into this house because nobody really wants to talk to her. She doesn't understand what she's supposed to do here. It's just a whole new environment for her. And slowly but surely throughout the book, she breaks down each of these men, and she kind of realizes what has happened to them, what has damaged them in some way, shape, or form, because each of them are damaged in a way. And trigger warnings for domestic violence, physical abuse, verbal abuse, assault. It's a lot. It's a lot going into it. You get some of it on page, and then some of it is just explained, but it's so sad to see all of these men and how broken they are. And she goes through and she doesn't try to completely fix them, but she tries to mend some of the bridges between each of them. And I loved it. I didn't think I would. Going in, I thought, it's a filler book, it'll be fine. It was so good. It was so good. Alright, so on a different note, after reading a mafia book, I then have Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano, and this one exceeded expectations. I kind of figured it would be good because everybody was talking about it, and it did so much better. So basically this follows Finlay, who is a writer, and she has basically been down on her luck for quite a while now. Her husband left her for their realtor. He left her with 2 kids and a pile of bills, and it seems like his career and his company are taking off while hers is kind of stalled. And so she ends up going to Panera to have a meeting with her editor, and while she's there pitching like this, I think it's like a thriller mystery story to her editor, a woman overhears her pitch and kind of gets the wrong idea and assumes that she is discussing her last job, basically. And so this woman leaves her a note saying, hey, I will pay you, I think it's like $40,000 to kill my husband. And Finlay is like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I have to warn him. And the story kind of snowballs from there because she is now in the like cusp of, or in the mix of this whole mess up, a misunderstanding, trying to warn this man before he gets killed. It's a whole thing, and I loved it. I loved Finlay, I loved Vero, I loved all the drama. It was hilarious. I couldn't stop. I think I finished it in like a day. It was that good. It was fantastic. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to read the other books in the series, and I'm super excited for it. Then I have Cherry Bomb by Carmel Rhodes. So this book, I'm going to be honest, this book is not the best book. It's not the most fantastic book. It is not earth-shattering, world-changing. But the reason why it ended up on my favorites list is because this book made me cry. And it made me cry for a lot of reasons. One of them being like loss of a parent. So trigger warnings for loss of a parent. There's a lot of talk about depression and drug use, so keep that in mind. But basically it follows Cherry, and she hasn't had the best life, but she's just trying to make it work. And she ends up agreeing to do this favor for her friend and join her for lunch while she goes to see her dad. Now, her friend has just learned, as like she's entering adulthood, who her father is. So she doesn't really know him. They're just trying to get to know each other. So Cherry agrees to go to this lunch. She shows up. She finds out that the man that she just slept with the night before is her friend's dad. And you get to see the dynamic between Cash and Cherry, because it's not like daddy kink. I don't want to put it like that, but it is where he is definitely more mature in a lot of ways than she is, and he's trying to like steer her without coercion, if that makes sense. Because sometimes I think that when you think about that, and you get an older person and a younger person, it kind of seems like they're trying to mold you into what they want, and he's not necessarily trying to do that. He's literally just trying to talk to her and get to know her, and he genuinely cares about her. And like I said, I did not plan on this being like a favorite book. It was good. I liked it for what it was, but as I got closer and closer to the end, I literally was sobbing, like sobbing. And I had to include it on this list just for that reason alone, because I don't cry at many books, and this one was just, it was a sad one for me. And I don't know what it touched in me, but it hit some notes that were just a little bit sensitive. And I think it's a lot to do with a lot of like similar life experiences between Cherry and me as well. So it was just a lot of things like that. But yeah, so I had to include that on this list just for that reason alone. Now we'll go back to books that I own. And the next book on my list, or the next series I should say on my list, it's a little bit of a cheat, but it's cool, is Zodiac Academy by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. And this series, okay, so I'm gonna be honest, this book, or this series, is like, it's like a trash series. It's like a guilty pleasure series. Like that thing you know you're not supposed to have, but you want it anyway, and so you keep going back to it. It's like that. Anyway, so it follows Tori and Darcy, and basically their parents died when they were babies, and they've been in and out of the foster care system. And then one day a man shows up and he tells them they are the long lost heirs to this fairy world, and in order to claim their throne they have to come back and attend Zodiac Academy. And they get there and they think they're gonna get like a welcome thing going on there, but it seems to be the opposite, and people very much do not want them there, especially the four heirs, who are like Darius, Caleb, Seth, and Max. And they have been groomed their whole lives to take over this world of Solaria, and now these two twins have come back and said, oh no, the throne is now mine instead, and they are not having it. So what I will say is, if you're going into this for the romance, don't do it. Don't do it, because you won't get it. If you're going into it for like the bullying, the angstiness, if that's what you're going into it for, you will like this. But if you're going into it for romance, you won't get it, because you don't really get any romance in this series until like the third or fourth book. The third book you get a little bit. The fourth book is where it really starts to like happen. But if you're going into it just for romance, you won't like it, because it'll take you thousands of pages. Like literally, I think the first book is like almost 600 pages, and then the second book is even longer, and every book after gets subsequently longer, because these are definitely like tomes and chunky books. So if you're going into it for the romance, do not, because you will be sorely disappointed and saying to yourself, why are you even reading it? But I loved them. I enjoyed them. I'm on book 7 currently, but I know it's going to break me a little bit, so I'm taking my time with it. But fantastic series. And then the next book I have is The Wrong Heart by Jennifer Hartman. Now, this one I think a lot of people will have Still Beating on their list, and I do have Still Beating, and I did love it, but I feel like I like this one a little bit more. So basically, this one follows Melody, and in the very beginning of the story, she's out on her anniversary with her husband, and her purse gets stolen. Her husband goes and chases after the thief, but he ends up getting hit by a car. No, that's not spoilers. It's literally in the very beginning. And following that, Melody falls down into a very deep, deep depression to the point where she is contemplating suicide. And so she ends up reaching out, like she steals the information on who got her husband's heart because he was an organ donor, and she ends up reaching out to that person, and they start a communication back and forth, and it ends up being like what saves her life a little bit. So she goes to a suicide prevention type group, support group, and she meets Parker. And Parker is definitely somebody who hates life. He doesn't really care that he's alive. Like, yeah, I'm alive, but is it really great? He is mad at the world and everyone in it. And Melody just doesn't really understand why he's in this group when he hates it. And he's kind of doing it for his sister. So they spark up a relationship, and is them and then her trying to decide between this person who has her husband's heart, who she has grown a connection with, and also Parker, who's in the support group, who she's also developing feelings for. And she's kind of at a crossroads, and she's torn, and it's a fantastic story, and it is heartbreaking and sad in a lot of spots, but it's also heartwarming, and you get to see people grow and change and develop. But I feel like that's with all of Jennifer Hartman's books, and I don't think you need to read any specific one. This one is fantastic, and I feel like with all of Jennifer Hartman's books, there is a development of growth and learning to crawl back out of the hole of grief, and I think that she does a great job with that. So next on my list is a book that I picked up on a whim. I had seen it in like an Instagram ad or something, and I picked it up because it sounded good, and it was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a mafia book. Just by the cover, it is not. And that is where The Land Where Sinners Atone by V.F. Mason. So this one follows Phoenix, and she seems like she has the perfect life. She is married to the man of her dreams. They're trying to have a baby. She has a great job. Everything seems to be going well until she gets off of her job one day, and she gets in her car and it starts driving itself. And then she hears a voice, and the voice is talking to her. And she doesn't know who it is or why they're doing this. And then all of a sudden her car hits a woman, and that woman dies. And in comes Zach, who is the male main character, and he decides he's going to ruin Phoenix's life because she killed the love of his life. This story will make you hate the male main character. I'm not going to lie. In the beginning, I hated him. I disliked him. He is awful. Some things happened in the beginning of this book that made me cry. It was so sad, and it just, ugh. But I will say, there's a lot of things in here that redeemed the male main character for me and made him not as awful of a person, and made it okay for him to be with the female main character. But I really, really loved this book. Overall, it is an emotional roller coaster, and it is one that I think I wholly enjoyed, and I definitely do want to reread it. And oh, it's so good. It's so good. But be prepared for the emotions, because it is a sad one. It is. Alright, so the next book I have on this list, I know is going to be a controversial one, and that is Double Edge by Nyla K. And this book, okay, so I am a taboo person. I love a taboo book. I pick them all up wholeheartedly. I love, and love outside of the box doesn't scare me, and this one was an interesting one. So it follows Coulson and Cyrus, who are twins, and they have led a very double life. where Coulson has had all kind of the bads of life. His parents view him as the bad twin and they neglect him a lot. And then you have Cyrus, and he's looked at as the good twin, and his parents see him as the golden child, like their future riches ticket, like their meal ticket, and that he is perfection. And so when something happens and their parents end up splitting up, their mom ends up remarrying Torin. And Torin is the owner of this tech company, I believe it is, like an app company or something. And he's rich, obviously. And they each get something from Torin that they were missing from their parents. So for Coulson, it's the support and the love that he wasn't getting from his parents. And for Cyrus, it's the support, but also it's not looking at him as their meal ticket and the encouragement, because Cyrus is very insecure. And so this is a romance between Cyrus and Coulson and Torin, all three together in a poly relationship. Now, you heard that correctly. It is a male twin stepfather romance. The reason why I didn't count this book out automatically is because as you read this, you kind of understand why Coulson and Cyrus would fall in love with each other. And part of it is, even though they're mirror images of each other on the outside, on the inside, they are extremely, extremely different. Where Coulson is very outspoken and very opinionated, Cyrus is very quiet and meek and mild. And where Cyrus is confident in his knowledge and his abilities, Coulson is very insecure and depressed, and he has a very dark side to him. So I didn't have a problem in my mind seeing them as not being twins, if that makes sense. I think for some people this will be a very hard pill to swallow. For me, it wasn't, but I've read sibling romances too, so that's not outlandish for me. It just so happens that these are twins. But overall, I loved the story. I loved the relationship that Torin developed with both Cyrus and Coulson. I loved Cyrus and Coulson together as well, and I liked that, it's hard to explain, but I liked the dynamic of them together, and that they weren't trying to force a forever. I mean, yes, they love each other, and yes, they want to be happy together, but they're not forcing that they will be together forever. And I think that with two people that are in the relationship being so young, I think that is something that you kind of have to think about. Because also, that's another thing, when the story starts, Cyrus and Coulson are only 17 and they turn 18 in the story. So you have to take in mind that they're so young, that will they want to be with someone so much older than them 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And I think that's a big thing for the story itself that I also really liked. So, oh, we're almost done. We have 5 more books. Okay. So the next one I have on this list is one that I read very early on, and I already knew, honestly, that it was going to be on my list. Well, that one of them would be on my list by the end of the year, because they were fantastic from the get-go. And so I have Hunting Adeline by H.G. Carlton, which is book 2 in the Cat and Mouse duet. So this series follows Addie, or this duet, I should say, rather, follows Addie, who is a writer, and she ends up moving into her grandmother's house after she passed away, and her grandmother owned this very dark, gothic house that's supposed to be haunted. And Addie, she knew that going into it, but she loved it, and she loved her grandmother, so she moved in. And as she's living there, she notices that there's a man outside of her house in the woods watching her. and that is Zaid, who is the hero of this romance. And Zaid is an interesting character. He is kind of like a vigilante where he goes after trafficking rings to save the innocent, and he's kind of made it his business, his mission to save all of the innocents. And he becomes obsessed and starts stalking Addie, and it's their romance. So I can't really explain what happens in book 2, but know that book 2 is a lot darker than book 1. Book 1, it's dark, don't get me wrong, it is a little bit gory, but book 2 is a lot darker. Overall, trigger warnings for sexual assault, dubious consent, consensual non-consent, sex trafficking, I'm trying to think of what else, mutilation, I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's it. But they do get very, very dark, but I love them so much, and they are like chunky 600-page books, but you need 500? No, 600, I was right. But you need all of those pages. You need it. It is worth it to read all of those pages, I promise. I love them. Oh, she's not getting an answer, so she'll wait. Alright. So, the next book I have on this list is one that I literally binged while I was at work in a night. It was that good. And the books are like novella length. They're like 200 pages per book. So they're really short. They're easy, quick reads. But that wasn't the draw. The draw was the banter and the comedy between the characters. But anyway, that is the Dark Side series by Christy Cunning. And the first one I think is called Four Psychos. Yeah, Four Psychos. I love this series so much. But anyway, let me tell you what it's about. So it follows a girl who is an entity. You don't know if she's a ghost, if she's a spirit, if she has been created, you don't know. And she is basically stuck in the house with these 4 guys. Or not in the house, but she's stuck with these 4 guys. So when they go somewhere, she goes with them. And she has no control over it. She doesn't... So I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, but anyway, so like I said, it follows a girl. She's attached to these 4 guys, and she doesn't know how she ended up with them or what happened to make her be with these 4 guys, but she knows she's stuck with them. And as the story goes on, she's slowly able to, like, first she's able to be heard by them, then she's able to be seen by them, and then eventually they're able to touch her. And I can't tell you too much more because it's giving away things. Like, she doesn't know who she is, why she's there. It's just they're suspicious she might have ulterior motives, or she might have been sent to them by somebody. It's a whole thing, but it's fantastic. I love it. I loved her figuring out who she is, what she likes. I loved her outspokenness, her banter between her and the guys, or her and anybody she talked to. Really, her personality is just like off the charts dynamic, and is just fantastic. Like, even if I just read you the back, it says, I'm not so different from most people. Like everyone else, I have life goals. Goal 1, become a real girl instead of this invisible ghost thing I currently am. Goal 2, convince the 4 men I've been haunting for the past 5 years to pick me to be their new toy after goal 1 is complete. Goal 3, figure out who or what I am and why I can't remember anything past the 5 years I've been haunting this quad. And goal number 4, eat popcorn. See? Perfectly normal, sort of. Gotta start small after all. It's not like anyone else is perfect either. See right there, you can already tell. It's fantastic. It's so funny. Alright, so next is a book by an author that I kind of already knew was going to be on this list when I picked it up, because I love this author and her writing so much, and that is Even If It Hurts by Sam Mariano. And I knew this was going to be on this list just because I love the, like, morally gray heroes that Sam Mariano writes. They tend to be characters you both hate and love at the same time. And this is no different. So this follows Aubrey, who kind of ends up on the bad side of the most popular girl in school because she basically tells her no, she can't have something that she wants. So this girl makes it her mission to ruin Aubrey's life. And to do that, she enlists Dare, her boyfriend, to do the job, basically. So he's supposed to get with Aubrey and then basically break her heart. But things don't necessarily work out that way, and Dare is very different. He is very emotionally withdrawn. He is definitely a psychopath, so know that going in. And Aubrey kind of just doesn't know how to react to him and him showing her attention because it's very different from what she's used to from him. Now, I will say this is not my favorite Sam Mariano, and if I had to compare, I definitely like Untouchable more than I like this one. And the reason for that is because I feel like Carter is much more for, like, you get to see that he actually loves Zoe, whereas in this, you're not sure if Dare actually loves Aubrey or if she is more of a possession to him and he wants to ensure that nobody else has her except for him. And even down to the end of the book, you still don't really know, is he doing this out of love or is he doing this out of obsession? And I feel like that's a very sketchy area to figure out. But I do really love this, and I do love Sam Mariano's male main characters because they are so morally gray, and they're definitely not good people, and none of them claim to be good people. But to see the one person that they are willing to bend all of their awful rules for just make it worth the read. Alright, so these next two books are two books that actually were going to be on my top reads of 2022 up until I think a week before the end of the year. So these were literally in the battle neck and neck between which one was going to be number one, and even when I was making this list I was like, I don't know which one I liked more, so we're just gonna go there because they're by the same author anyway. So the first one I have is Savages by Natalie Bennett, and this book, or this series rather, it's a Badlands series, and it follows, well, the first two books follow a couple, and then the next one, the third one, follows a different couple, and then so on and so forth. But these first two follow Callie and Romero, and basically Callie is on the run from her cult that she's like grown up in, and they kind of abused her. They used and abused her and left her for dead, and she ends up getting picked up off the side of the road and taken in by this group of people, and these people are looking for the Savages, basically, which is another cult. So going into the series, if you've ever read in my mind, I think of it as like Kit Rocha's Sector series. So if you've ever read that, this is very similar, where it's like a city in the center. The world has kind of like fallen apart. So you have a city in the center, and then you have the sectors on the outside. Well, in this, there's no sectors. It's basically just two cults on the outside and then one city in the center. So the city is supposed to be like the richest families in this area, and then the two cults on the outside, on the outskirts, run everything else. And so Romero is the leader of the Savages, basically, and they are seen as like this devil worshipping cult, and he is the devil, basically, is how they look at it. And she is supposed to be looking for him to take down this cult, this other cult that she's from. I don't remember what they were called, but basically she's looking for him to take them down. And along the way, she has a lot of troubles. So I will say trigger warnings for cannibalism, for dubious consent, consensual non-consent, blood play. I'm trying to think what else. It's a lot going into this. So no, this is very dark. It is very dark. I think knife play. It's a lot going on here. But it was so good. It was so good. If you can handle a dark book, I would pick this up. It is so good. And if you like I said, if you like the Sector series, you will like this series. It is that good. So there's that. And then the book that I had that was neck and neck with that one is A Lawless Kingdom, or rather the Reign and Ruin series by Natalie Bennett. And this one is very different. It's still very dark, like Savages, but it's very different. So this one follows Rhiannon, and it seems like everything's going well in her life. Her parents and her have just moved into this new big house. She has a boyfriend who she really loves. She has a great best friend. Things seem to be going well, and then her boyfriend starts acting weird. So she decides she's going to surprise him and show up at this party. Well, when she gets there, she ends up catching the attention of Judas Barron, and he is from the richest family in their town, and people don't really know much about him or his friends, and they kind of want to keep it that way because to catch their attention is never good. People tend to disappear. So when she catches Judas's attention, her boyfriend kind of does everything he can to make it not so, to help her, but things don't end up working out that way, and Judas becomes obsessed with Rhiannon. And throughout this series, you actually get to see how obsessed he really is. This is definitely like anybody who stands in my way of getting what I want, I will kill you vibes. Anything that comes between him and her and him having her is they're dead. They're dead. That's it. There's no even like question about it. They're just dead. But I loved it. Throughout the series, you definitely get an evolution, and there is a time gap in the series, but oh, it was so good. It was so good. I'm obsessed. I'm trying to find it in other books, and I'm kind of finding similar but not exactly the same. So I definitely will be doing a reread this year of the series because it was that good. It was so good. Between these two, I could not. And I read them like back to back. So I read this first and then I read this, and it ruined me for the end of the year. I didn't even want to pick up any more books after that. But I ended up picking up this last book, which is my #1 book of the year. Well, technically it's not a book. It's a fanfic, and I ended up picking up Manacled by Sin-Lung Yu. And so I love Harry Potter. My whole family knows I love Harry Potter. It is one of my favorite stories. I own it. I own all versions of it, as well as like I'm looking up because they're on the top of my shelf as like memorabilia and like a ton of stuff. But anyway, so I had always wanted to read this, but I felt like it was so daunting because of how long it was. And it was because it took me like 2 weeks to get through it. And really, it took me 2 weeks because after a while I had to take a break to do other things. And it was over the holidays and everything, so. But honestly, it probably would have took me about a week if I had like stuck through it straight through. This book. So good. So basically, I should tell you what it's about. So it follows Hermione, and this takes place basically 6 years after what happened in the Order of the Phoenix. So Voldemort has won the war, and Harry is dead. Everybody in the Order is dead except for Hermione, and she's the only one that's survived. And she's been kept in captivity for the last like year and a half, where nobody knew where she was, and little did they know she's been in the dungeons underneath of Hogwarts all this time. And when they finally find her, Voldemort comes up with this new idea of a breeding program. So it turns into like Handmaid's style story where she is given to Draco Malfoy to breed and produce him heirs. And then also they find that through this time of her being locked up, she's locked up her mind. So there's things in her mind that she can't remember and nobody else can get to. from any magical means. And so they've devised the fact that, well, if she gets pregnant and has a baby, her mind is more open. So that's also why they enter her into this program. And the story is so heartbreaking. It's so sad. I wanted to cry as I was reading it. Actually, I think I did cry a little bit, but it is so sad. So sad. And I think it brought up a lot of questions, a lot of good questions, basically. So every time I watch Harry Potter from now on, I will think of this story. But I think this story brings up a lot of big debates on war and what war actually does to people. And I think that it brings up a lot of debate on whether war really has any winners. You know, throughout history, we always talk about, oh, this person won the war, or this person won the war. Well, did you actually win? Because in the long scheme of things, yeah, you may have been able to say, yeah, I won this, but were you actually the good party or the bad party? Everybody says they were the good people when they win a war. Nobody is ever going to say that they were the bad people who won the war, you know, and we don't know. It's whatever's in our history books. But when you read this, you kind of think, like, are there actually any good people winning a war? And then on top of that, you have the debate of, did anybody actually win? You know, both sides always end up with deaths. Both sides always end up with people who come back damaged and broken and have to learn to heal. You know, people have injuries, they lose limbs, you have PTSD, the psychological damage. You know, it's a lot. And is anybody actually winning based on those things? And it's just an interesting viewpoint to look at this story and have it have so many deep concepts and questions that it brings up, and topics that make you want to discuss what is really going on. And it's such a interesting viewpoint because I feel like it's very easily comparable to what is going on in the world today. And I enjoyed this story so much. So much. It was fantastic. Not only the debate on what actually constitutes as a winner of a war, or are there winners, but also just the deep love story that you get throughout this, of people who are on opposite sides of a war and they're just trying to survive and do the things that the people around them expect of them, even if it's at the detriment to themselves. Even though it's breaking them on the inside, they're still doing this. And it just, number one, fantastic. It is definitely why it's my number one favorite book of 2022. I loved it. It was so good. I could not put it down. I can't recommend it highly enough. Honestly, I read this book and now I want to bind it myself in my own fan fiction. Oh, I loved it. It was so good. If you don't pick up any other book from this entire list, I recommend you pick that one up because it is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. It definitely should be an actual book. I'm not even gonna lie. A publisher should pick that one up because it was so good. It was so good. And I was like discussing it with other people in my life, and it just, I can't say more about it. But yeah, that is it. As usual, I'll leave all of the books linked down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. And I will see you guys in my next video, hopefully very soon. Bye, guys.